Hello? Oh, it's the national government. They want to talk to us about federalism.
Federalism. Federalism is government authority shared by local and national governments. Dual federalism. Dual federalism is the doctrine holding that the national government is supreme in its sphere, the states are supreme in theirs, and the two spheres should be kept separate. Cooperative federalism. Cooperative federalism is a flexible relationship between the federal and the state governments when they work together on a variety of issues. Programs and authorities are mixed among national, state, and local governments. Fiscal federalism. Fiscal federalism is how state, federal, and local governments share funding within our federal system. Funding comes from taxes and fees and then is used to enforce federal demand. Period.
Enumerated powers, also known as express powers, are powers given directly by the Constitution. These powers are contained in Article 1, Section 8, and include power to declare war, laying and collecting taxes, regulating foreign and interstate commerce, coining money, raising and maintaining a military, and to make laws necessary and proper. Implied powers are political powers granted to the government that aren't explicitly stated in the Constitution because similar powers have a set precedent. These are necessary to any given governing body and derive from the right of the Congress and tie into the necessary and proper clause. This is also located in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution and usually refers to the elastic clause because it stretches the authority of Congress. Commerce Clause, referred also in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the Constitution, gives the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among several states and within the Indian tribes. It's argued that both Congress and state possess simultaneous power to regulate commerce. Lastly, the Necessary and Proper Clause enables Congress to pass special laws to require other departments of the government to prosecute or adjudicate particular claims, whether asserted by the government itself or by private persons. Right?
Dude.
The Supremacy Clause is Article 6, Paragraph 2 of the U.S. Constitution. It makes the state laws inferior to the federal government and stops them from exercising governmental power. However, it does not let the government review state laws before they are created. Article 1, Section 8 specifies the power allocated to Congress and has the enumerated powers, implied powers, the Commerce Clause, and the Necessary and Proper Clause discussed previously. The 10th Amendment says that the powers not given to the federal government are vested in the people or the states. These powers are the reserved powers. The concurrent powers are powers that are shared by state and federal governments. These are the power to collect tax and borrow money, set up a court system, create laws to maintain health, safety, welfare, and governments, to set minimum wage, and to charter banks.
The Full Faith and Credit Clause ensures that every state must respect the judicial decisions and legal records of other states. For example, if a couple gets married in Connecticut, they're also considered married in all the other states. If someone gets their license in Connecticut, they can also drive in the other 49 states. The Interstate Commerce Clause states that the government can regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes, meaning that the government can regulate business between one state and another. The Privileges and Immunities Clause basically reinforces the citizens' right to life, liberty, and property, and guarantees that one state cannot restrict the rights of citizens from another state. The Extradition Clause states that a convicted criminal can be returned to the state that they committed the crime in. Now let's talk about grants, which in this context is the allocation of federal money to the states. A block grant is when the federal government gives money to the states to be spent in a broad category and gives the states freedom to use the money how they want within that category. A categorical grant is when the federal government gives money to states which must be used for a specific purpose stipulated by the federal government, so it's less freedom for the state governments. A project grant is a type of categorical grant awarded for an application for a specific merit project, such as a program to help reform education. And lastly, a formula grant is a type of categorical grant for regulated statistical criteria. For example, a grant to a local government for something specific such as Medicaid, education, or public transportation.
Examples of powers exclusive to states are establishing local governments, issuing licenses, regulating interstate commerce, conducting elections, ratifying amendments to the Constitution, providing for public health and safety, and exercising powers not delegated to the national government but also not prohibited from the states by the Constitution.
Examples of powers exclusive to federal government is establishing and collecting taxes, regulating commerce with foreign nations in the states, establishing laws regulating immigration and naturalization, printing money, declaring war, establishing an army and a navy, enter into treaties with foreign governments, regulating commerce between states and international trade, establishing post offices, postal roads, and issuing postage, making laws necessary to enforce the Constitution, implied powers, and inherent powers.
Examples of concurrent powers are setting up a country's dual court system, creating and collecting taxes, building highways, borrowing money, making and enforcing laws, chartering banks and corporations, spending money for betterment of general welfare, and taking private property with just compensation.
Gibbons v. Ogden was a federal court case involving governmental power. New York State had granted Robert R. Livingston and Robert Fulton exclusive access to New York State waters, which gave them a monopoly. Thomas Gibbons was a steamboat operator who had a license from the federal government, and he formed a partnership with a competitor to Livingston and Fulton named Aaron Ogden. Ogden had bought the state license from Livingston and Fulton. 3 years later, Gibbons used a steamboat on Ogden's route, which he claimed belonged to him. Ogden then filed a lawsuit against Gibbons and received an injunction from the state of New York. The case rose to the Supreme level. It was ruled there that any federal license overrode state permissions. This strengthened the federal government using the Commerce Clause of the Constitution to impose federal power over state ruling. The Supreme Court defined commerce as commerce between the states, including navigation. This became a difficult subject as white Southerners feared the federal government would expand their powers and eradicate slavery. Due to this, the wording of the court's findings had to be incredibly specific.
McCulloch v. Maryland was a case in 1819 when the Supreme Court ruled that Congress had implied powers by the necessary and proper clause of Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution to create the Second Bank of the United States, and that Maryland did not have the power to tax the bank. This shows federalism as it reaffirmed the fact that the federal government of the United States has power over the state government and it strengthened the federal government.